"James, you are a disgrace to this family, and you are not wanted here." These words, filled with anger and disappointment, were hurled at me by my father during my brother Paul's wedding celebration, cutting through the air like venom. The humiliation was unbearable, exacerbated by Paul's silence. He stood by, saying nothing as our father dismissed me like I was worthless. Filled with anger, I was on the verge of leaving when something unexpected occurred. A member of the wedding staff, overwhelmed by an unforeseen crisis, sought my help. This unexpected plea changed the course of the evening. By helping, something shifted. For the first time in years, my father truly saw me, saw the person I had become, and not the failure he always believed me to be. It shocked us both. My name is James, one of two brothers in this family. Our father was a stern, demanding lawyer who favored my brother Paul, the golden child, who embodied everything our father desired in a son: confident, successful, and seemingly flawless. Meanwhile, I always lingered in Paul's shadow, never deemed good enough. Our home was devoid of play or leisure. Every moment was dedicated to studying or lessons, and any joy I found was swiftly crushed by my father's disapproval. Despite my relentless efforts to match Paul's achievements and earn my father's approval, I consistently fell short. The final blow came when I failed the entrance exam for a prestigious school my father had set his heart on. The silence that followed was deafening. From that moment, I felt invisible in his eyes. His focus shifted entirely to Paul, leaving me behind, and even my mother's quiet support couldn't fill the growing void. Determined to escape the suffocating environment at home, I made a difficult decision after high school. I left without speaking to my father, leaving only a note for my mother, telling her that I was going to make my own way. I found work at a hotel where I could both live and earn a living. The hotel became my sanctuary, far removed from my father's expectations and judgments. Amid the hustle of guests and staff, I found a sense of freedom and fulfillment previously unknown at home. However, the job wasn't easy. The hotel manager, Brian, was strict and demanding. Every mistake I made was met with sharp criticism, and as someone fresh out of high school, I made plenty. "James, another error. How many times do I have to tell you?" he would assert, pushing me to improve. Yet, unlike my father's degrading remarks, Brian's feedback aimed to build me up. When I earned his praise, it instilled a pride and motivation I had never experienced before. One moment stands out. During Los Angeles, the busiest time for the hotel, I had completed all mandatory training, and the pressure was intense. Everyone was rushing, with tensions high, yet I was determined to prove myself, not just to Brian, but to myself. In that bustling hotel chaos, I realized I didn't need my father's approval to find value in myself. I had built something of my own, worth more than any acknowledgement from him. This journey had been long and painful, but it led me to a place where I could finally see myself clearly, not as a failure, but as someone strong and capable. That year, I was entrusted to work independently for the first time, facing challenges I hadn't imagined. The hotel was packed with guests, far exceeding usual capacity, pushing our resources to their limits. The hustle of serving dinner, both in the dining hall and through room service, reached a peak. Although still new to the job, I immersed myself in the work, aware that my inexperience might complicate matters for the team, yet I was determined to do my best. Then, on Los Angeles's day, just as things seemed manageable, a colleague fell ill, leaving us short-staffed. I knew I had to step up, pushing beyond normal hours to ensure everything ran smoothly. During the height of the dinner service chaos, disaster struck when a pipe burst in the kitchen. With the area quickly flooding and no plumber available on that day in Los Angeles, the situation soon spiraled out of control. Stress was clearly written on the face of Brian, the hotel manager, as he struggled to manage the crisis. In a moment of necessity, I stepped forward and offered, "Brian, can I attempt to fix the plumbing? I'm confident I can handle it." Surprised, he looked at me skeptically, but recognizing there were no alternatives, he hesitated only briefly before giving me the go-ahead. Unknown to him, my background from a science-focused high school had provided me with basic plumbing knowledge. Utilizing these skills, I set to work, and in half an hour, the kitchen was back in order, the flood gone, and the pipe repaired. I turned to Brian, breathless but smiling. I managed to fix it. Excitedly, he tested the tap, his face lighting up as water flowed smoothly, causing the room to erupt in applause and smiles. "Great job, James. You're my pride and joy," Brian praised warmly, his approval filling me with unparalleled accomplishment. Growing up with Brian at the hotel had profoundly changed my life. Together, we overcame the challenges of that chaotic day in Los Angeles, emerging victorious. The fulfillment I gained that day remained with me and shaped who I became. 2 decades later, I found myself thriving in a career at the hotel, which I had painstakingly built from the ground up. Then one day, a letter from my mother broke the long silence between us, announcing my brother Paul's upcoming wedding. Although I had become alienated from both my father and Paul, my mother's heartfelt request for my presence touched me deeply, and reluctantly, I agreed to attend the wedding. The venue, a luxurious hotel, reflected Paul and Dad's love for extravagance and opulence. Entering in my trusty old suit, I felt out of place amid high society guests whose elegance and wealth were evident in every detail. Paul's bride, exuding flawless grace, seemed the perfect complement to his world, possibly even the consequence of one of Dad's strategic partnerships. In the waiting room, surrounded by faces of influence and privilege, I felt like an outsider, quietly observing a world I had long left behind. The guests danced their intricate dance of wealth and power, but I no longer fit their rhythm. My life, constructed far from such expectations, felt removed from this opulent world, prompting me to question if I should have come at all. Yet, sitting unacknowledged, clarity struck. I no longer needed their approval, nor to fit into their world. I had carved out my own path, no longer the boy desperate for paternal acceptance, but James, satisfied in his self-made life. Locking eyes with 2 familiar faces, unease washed over me as my father's unmistakable disapproval became apparent. Dad and Paul approached, their presence looming. "Why are you here?" Dad's authoritative voice dripped with a familiar contempt that stirred old memories I had long tried to repress. "Is it so wrong to want to celebrate Paul's wedding?" I responded lightly, forcing a smile. "Oh, and congratulations, Paul." Paul's nod was half-hearted, his face torn between family loyalty and the long-standing tension between us. Before he could speak, Dad interjected, his voice cutting like a knife. "What have you been doing all these years?" "No doubt some worthless job." His words were laden with disdain. "James, you shouldn't be here," he continued, his tone scornful. Before I could reply, my mother rushed over, desperate to defuse the tension. "Come on. James is here to celebrate. No need to be so harsh," she pleaded, her voice shaky but hopeful. Her efforts were futile. "Enough, Mom," Dad commanded harshly, silencing her. "James, let me be clear. You are a disgrace. I don't want you ruining Paul's big day." The celebration stirred a storm within me, anger fueled by years of neglect and rejection. I had no desire to attend this wedding, yet here I found myself, humiliated in front of everyone. "Fine, I'm leaving," I declared with a steady voice and turned to go. But just as I was about to step out, a voice halted me. A flustered wedding staff member approached, urgency evident on their face. "Excuse me," they said, slightly out of breath. "We have a problem. An unexpected guest has shown up, and we're short on seats and food." Turning back, I saw the tension in the room. Everyone appeared concerned, Olivia, the wedding planner, the in-laws, and even my father. They were all frantically searching for a solution. For a moment, I hesitated, part of me wanting to leave them to deal with the chaos. After all, wasn't this my chance to walk away from those who had always turned their back on me? However, memories of the past flooded back. Despite everything, there were moments when Paul and I, as kids, found time to bond, playing together during breaks despite Dad's strict rules. Those recollections softened my resolve, reminding me that we were once brothers, not just rivals. Walking away now would make me no better than the person my father always accused me of being. With a sigh of determination, I turned back to the staff member. "Take me to Olivia," I said, my voice now firmer. The staff member's tense expression eased with relief. Following them back into the room I had been expelled from, I reclaimed my spot. In the center, Olivia, my father, and the bride's father stood with anxious faces, growing more worried by the minute. Olivia looked up as I approached, surprised yet grateful. "James, thank goodness. We really need help," she admitted, explaining the guest list dilemma and seating chaos. Taking a deep breath, I surveyed the disorder. Despite everything, Dad's words, Paul's silence, I knew what needed to be done. "All right, let's get to work," I stated, stepping forward to control the situation. Throughout the evening, I worked alongside Olivia and the staff, ensuring everything ran smoothly. As dinner unfolded without further complications, I noticed furtive glances from Dad and Paul. Their silence seemed different, almost as if they were finally seeing me in a new light. When the night concluded, I watched the happy couple's first dance from the reception's edge. Though I wasn't part of their world, I no longer felt like an outsider. I'd proven, mostly to myself, that I belonged, not through their approval, but by forging my own path. As I quietly exited the celebration before anyone noticed, I felt at peace. This was no longer my world, and that was fine. I had found my own place, and for me, that sufficed. As I approached, locking eyes with my father, his hostility was clear, his demeanor stiff with anger. "Why has James returned?" he demanded sharply. Olivia, the wedding planner, quickly intervened before things could escalate further. "General Manager, please, we need your help," she pleaded urgently. The title caught my father off guard, evident in his shock as I calmly confirmed my position. "I've been the general manager of this hotel chain for quite some time," I explained steadily. "Since joining in its early days, we've expanded to multiple hotels and wedding venues nationwide. In fact, this very hotel is under my oversight. I believe I can handle this," I added confidently, dismissing my father's protests. "Dad, I'm busy now, we'll talk later." Without waiting for a response, I turned to Olivia, determined to get things back on track. "Relax, Olivia. Get the seating sorted, and I'll manage the food situation," I instructed, watching relief wash over her. "Understood," she replied, her gratitude evident. "I'll leave the food to you, and handle the rest." She quickly departed to execute the plan, while I stepped out of the room, aware of the gazes still upon me. I in the kitchen, my good friend Chef Brandon was immersed in his daily tasks. "Hey you," I called, spotting him. "James, what brings you here?" he inquired with curiosity. "I'm actually a guest today," I explained with a chuckle. "It's my brother's wedding, but we're a meal short. Can you help us out?" Brandon grinned. "Of course, I'll whip something up. Don't worry about it." "Thanks so much, I owe you one," I said, relieved. "Perhaps dinner next time?" Brandon winked, already prepping the extra meal. Once I took care of some things, I returned to the waiting area. Most guests had moved to the ceremony, leaving only my parents and the bride's family behind. "The issue is resolved, and an extra meal is on its way," I announced. Relief spread across my mom's face, while the bride's parents smiled gratefully. Even my father, despite his usual critical demeanor, seemed surprisingly mild-mannered. "James, thank you. Because of you, the celebration can proceed smoothly," he acknowledged, his gratitude genuine. Feeling quietly triumphant, I replied, all in a day's work as a general manager, and escorted them to the ceremony hall. As the lights dimmed and the bride and groom made their entrance, I was mesmerized by their radiance. The ceremony unfolded without a hitch, every aspect in perfect harmony, dispelling the earlier chaos. When it was time for the meal, I ensured everything was flawless, each guest served seamlessly. Only then did I allow myself a sigh of relief, content that the day unfolded well. Post-ceremony, I engaged in warm conversations with both families. They expressed heartfelt gratitude, especially the bride's family, endlessly thanking me for stepping in amid the crisis. Sharing smiles and gratitude, I remembered why I loved my job, not just managing a hotel or events, but making a significant impact when needed most. Their appreciation was sincere. James, thank you. We had the best day ever, all because of you. No worries, I'm just glad I could help. Wishing you a lifetime of happiness, I replied warmly. Turning to my parents and Paul, my mom's proud expression greeted me. James, you did wonderfully, thank you, she praised, pride in her voice. Paul approached next, his apology earnest, thanking me for stepping in. My resentment softened as I assured him, as long as I could help, it's all good. Finally, I faced my dad. He was silent, his emotions unreadable, yet a quiet acknowledgement shone in his eyes. Though he said nothing, I sensed his gratitude, a moment of closure realizing our differences didn't negate common ground. Just then, my phone signaled more work at another hotel in the next town. I viewed the message with purpose, not frustration. Looks like I've got work to do, but I enjoy it, so no complaints, I grinned. All right, I'm off. You two take care. Departing, a lingering thought arose. This might be the last time I'd see Paul or Dad for a while. The thought lingered, yet I didn't look back. I had work to do, my focus undeterred. 5 days post-wedding, I enjoyed a rare day off, reclining on my sofa with coffee, savoring peace. The doorbell chimed, curiosity drawing me to the door. Surprised, I found Paul standing there. Paul, what brings you here? I asked, surprised by his visit. Sorry, I got your address from Mom. I wanted to. Paul spoke in a cautious tone as he began to explain. Inviting him inside, I didn't worry too much about how my house looked. After all, it was just Paul. As I poured him a cup of coffee, he took a slow sip and remarked, "Thank you, it smells good." He attempted a smile, but I could sense there was more weighing on his mind. When we sat down to talk, Paul's demeanor changed. His gaze became more serious, and I could tell he needed to say something important. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke. "I'm really sorry for everything," he said, softer than I'd ever heard. Initially, I was surprised. Paul rarely apologized for anything, and hearing this from him left me puzzled. "Hey, it's all right, Paul," I reassured, trying to ease the tension, knowing he had more to say. Unexpectedly, Paul continued, opening up in a way I hadn't anticipated. "You might see me as the older brother with it all together, but in reality I envy you, James," he confessed, shaking my preconceived notions and leaving me speechless. The room felt heavy with silence as his confession lingered. I had always perceived him as the favored one, the golden child who had everything I lacked. Yet, sitting across from me, he displayed a vulnerability I hadn't known was there. Realizing Paul struggled beneath the surface surprised me, leaving me unsure how to react initially. All I knew was this moment marked a turning point. It would change how I saw him and how we could move forward as brothers. In this moment, past rivalries, distances, and unspoken tensions dissolved. We were two brothers finally understanding each other as never before. "I never knew you felt that way, Paul," I admitted, feeling somewhat guilty as I processed his revelation. "That's the thing, it's not your fault, James," Paul reassured, his faint smile conveying deep emotions. At that moment, I sensed a mutual understanding bridging the gap that had lingered. "Paul, I'm sorry, I never realized you were struggling too," I expressed, regretting my lack of awareness. His faint smile spoke volumes, more than words could express. "It's really not your fault," he repeated softly in the quiet room. We began discussing things we had never spoken of before, strengthening our bond. "I admire you for enduring things I can't imagine," I honestly told him, "but I'd like to share my story with you too." Feeling the weight of my words, I paused, and Paul listened intently. Breaking away from our parents to become independent wasn't easy. It was tough at first, I confided, realizing how both of us faced challenges. "Yes, we've both dealt with struggles," Paul agreed sincerely. He seemed to have more to share, but I wasn't sure how to guide him or what advice to offer, so I spoke from the heart. "Honestly, Paul, do what you truly wish without worrying about Dad," I suggested, hoping it would bring him clarity. Paul considered my words, relief gradually washing over him. You're right, James. You've helped me see things clearly, thank you, he expressed, gratitude evident in his voice. No, thank you for coming, I replied sincerely. I accompanied him to the door, and before leaving, he promised he would return for coffee soon. A month later, I received a letter from Paul. He shared that he had chosen to leave his legal career to pursue his true passion, glass craftsmanship. Even though Dad disapproved, Paul found peace with his wife's support and newfound motivation in his chosen path. Reflecting on Paul's journey and the changes within our family, I felt immense pride in the strengthened bond between us. Lost in thought, my phone alarm abruptly pulled me back to reality, signaling the start of another day in the career I had chosen.